The cuffs snapped on my wrists right under the stained glass skylight at Harborline Terminal, and the officer behind me said loud enough for strangers to hear that I was being arrested for solicitation because I fit the profile. I had literally just told him politely that I wasn't interested in talking to him, and he took that rejection like it was a personal attack on his manhood. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that my purse had been recording everything from the second he walked up to me, and that one little detail was about to turn his entire career into evidence. If you've ever watched somebody with authority use it like a weapon, you already know this feeling, that tight, helpless anger in your chest, the kind that makes you want to scream and also makes you swallow it because you're calculating, thinking, surviving. So, yeah, that happened, and I'm going to tell you the whole thing the way it felt, not the polished version people put on paperwork. The real version. The version where you can smell the coffee breath and feel the eyes on you, and you start realizing how fast a normal day can turn into a nightmare when the wrong person decides they get to own you. It was a Tuesday morning in Crescent Point, one of those bright, busy mornings where everyone's rushing and nobody's really looking at anybody. Harbor Line is this huge old terminal with marble floors and brass railings and that iconic clock in the center, sunlight pouring in like it's trying to make the place look romantic for tourists. And my job that morning was to blend into that scene like I belonged there, like I was just another person waiting on someone who's running late. Except I wasn't just waiting, I was working, I was undercover, and the whole operation depended on me staying calm and invisible. My cover name was Sadie Lane, a high-end escort from out of town. My look was deliberate red dress hair, done nice bag, the whole expensive but slightly lost vibe that attracts the kind of attention we needed from the target we were trying to catch. And inside that designer bag was a covert recorder already running, plus a hidden compartment stitched into the lining where my real credentials lived for emergencies, only because you do not flash those unless you have no other choice. You know what I mean? My team was nearby, spread out like random commuters. One guy in work boots pretending to check a maintenance panel, another one with a tourist map, a woman at the coffee stand acting bored, two more leaning against a wall like they were waiting on a train. And in my ear it was quiet, which usually meant we were close because once the chatter starts, it means something's going sideways. I was watching the flow of people checking the clock, doing that little nervous glance around that makes you look like you're waiting for a date, and I could feel this stare before I even saw it, that heavy, proprietary kind of gaze that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. I turned slightly, and there he was, Officer Evan Crowley, uniformed transit cop, mid to late 30s, belly pressing the fabric a little too tight, jaw set like the world owed him respect, leaning near a pillar like he owned that spot, scanning the crowd, the way some men scan a bar, not looking for crime, looking for a target. He had an older partner with him, Officer Briggs, who looked exhausted, the kind of guy who survives by staying quiet and letting the loud one run the show. And when Crowley's eyes landed on me, I watched his whole posture change like a switch flipped in his head from patrol to hunt. He adjusted his duty belt. That little performance move smoothed his shirt and started walking toward me with this swagger that didn't match his rank, like the uniform itself was supposed to make him irresistible. He stopped too close, close enough that I caught the smell of stale coffee and gum, and he gave me this smile that was supposed to be charming but felt like grease. "Morning," he said. "You lost, ma'am." I gave him my safe smile, the one that says friendly without inviting anything, and I stayed in character, just waiting for someone. Soft accent, a little unsure. His eyes went down my dress and back up like I was an item on a shelf, and he said, "Rough place to wait. Lucky for you, I'm here, protect and serve," and he actually tapped his badge like it was a backstage pass. I kept it light because the goal in that moment wasn't to win an argument. It was to get him away from me before he drew attention and spooked the real target, so I said, "I appreciate it, officer, but I'm fine, he'll be here any minute." A normal person would take that cue nod and walk away. But Crowley wasn't normal. Crowley heard boundaries like they were challenges. He leaned against the kiosk beside me, basically blocking my easiest path, and said, "Any minute, huh? If I had a woman like you waiting, I'd be early." Then he started painting a plan like it was already decided. "There's a steak place around the corner. Good bourbon. You look like you deserve something nicer than standing here." His partner Briggs stared at the departures board like it held the secrets of the universe, pretending he didn't see any of it. And that right there, that quiet complicity, that's part of why these guys get bold, because somebody always stands behind them and looks away. I tried again, still calm, still controlled. "No thanks. I'm not interested," and I meant it as a clean exit, a polite door closing. Crowley's smile died so fast it was almost impressive. His face flushed and he repeated my words louder like he wanted an audience. Not interested. You come in here dressed like that and you're not interested. Heads turned. You could feel the air shift, and that's when my internal clock started racing because attention is danger on an undercover meet. Attention is a spotlight you didn't ask for. I did something I usually avoid. I let the real voice slip through, crisp, no accent. Officer, step back. You're making me uncomfortable. Leave me alone. And for half a second I saw surprise flicker across his face, like he hadn't expected the woman in the red dress to sound like she had authority. But then his ego took over and the surprise curdled into anger. He scoffed and said, "Uncomfortable. You know what's uncomfortable? Girls like you hanging around transit hubs looking for out-of-towners with cash." And right there, he started building a story out loud, brick by brick, because when a man like that is embarrassed, he doesn't walk away, he rewrites reality until he's the hero again. I stayed steady. Name and badge number now. I'm filing a complaint, and that sentence hit him like gasoline on a fire. My badge number. He laughed sharp and ugly. You're not in a position to demand anything. You're in a position to answer questions. And he leaned closer, his hand drifting toward his cuffs like his body had done this before, and his voice dropped into that low, controlling growl. What's your name? Who are you meeting? What are you doing here? Briggs finally muttered. Evan, come on. And Crowley shot him a look that said, stay out of it. Then turned back to me and announced like he was giving a press conference. Solicitation is a crime in this city. Serious crime. And I said clearly, because I wanted it on the record. On what grounds I haven't done anything. You have no probable cause. And he jabbed a finger at my dress and said, your outfit, your location, your attitude. You tried to walk away. That's you soliciting, which is not how the law works, but it is how a bully's brain works when he's desperate to punish you for not playing along. In that moment, my training was doing two things at once. Part of me was furious, part of me was ice calm, and the calm part was screaming, don't resist, don't give him an excuse. Let the cameras and the recorder do their job, because the second you react physically, he gets to claim you were combative, and that's the trap. Crowley lunged, grabbed my arm hard, spun me like I was nothing, and shoved me into the metal edge of the kiosk, the impact stealing my breath, and for a second the world went a little blurry around the edges. But I stayed limp. I stayed compliant, not because I was weak, but because I was choosing the battlefield. He wrenched my wrists behind my back and cinched the cuffs too tight, the kind of tight that's meant to hurt, the kind that says, remember who did this to you. And I heard a collective gasp from the small crowd that had formed. I saw phones lift, people filming good. I remember thinking, because witnesses matter. Crowley started barking Miranda like it was a victory speech, yanking me forward through the terminal as if parading me was part of the punishment. And in my ear, my team finally came alive, tense and confused, asking what was happening. And I whispered back through clenched teeth, stay in cover. Document everything, because the target was probably watching, and the second he saw law enforcement chaos, he would vanish, months of work gone. The ride to Midtown Central Precinct was Crowley performing for Briggs, saying I was obviously a pro, that it was implied that the DA would love this, and Briggs barely responded, hands tight on the wheel, because he knew there was no real probable cause, and he chose silence anyway. And that's the part that still sticks in my throat. How many times have women been shoved into the back of a car because someone like Briggs didn't feel like rocking the boat? At booking, Crowley turned humiliation into a hobby, dumping my bag out and mocking everything like it was proof of his made-up story, holding up my alias ID and saying loud, Sadie Lane. Long way from home, smirking like he'd caught me in something, and I stayed quiet because silence makes liars talk, and the more he talked, the deeper he dug. They put me in a holding cell, concrete bench, cold under my legs, wrists burning, shoulder throbbing. And once the adrenaline started fading, the anger showed up clean and sharp, not just because of what he did to me, but because I could picture exactly how this plays out for someone without a recorder, without a team, without a badge tucked in a hidden seam, because most people don't get a lifeline. Most people get a record and a ruined day and a lesson they didn't deserve. I sat there and built my timeline in my head like a prosecutor, times, locations, exact phrases, where the cameras were, how the crowd reacted, how tight the cuffs were, because pain becomes useful when you turn it into details. About an hour later, they walked me into interview room 2, and Crowley was already there, feet up on the table, grin wide, like he'd been waiting for this moment all morning. Let's make this easy, he said. You tell me who you work for, I keep you out of jail. And he leaned forward with this smug satisfaction. You're in my world now. Nobody's listening to you. That was the peak. That was the exact moment I realized he truly believed what he was saying, like the building itself would protect him. I didn't even look at him. I looked at the desk sergeant by the door, Sergeant Halvers, who looked bored, arms crossed like he'd seen 1,000 versions of this and didn't care about any of them, and I said calm and clear, "Sergeant Halvers, my name isn't Sadie Lane." He blinked. "That's what your ID says," and I said that ID is a prop. My real name is Special Agent Riley Hart, Federal Investigations Bureau. My credentials are hidden in my handbag. Retrieve them. Crowley's feet hit the floor so fast his chair squealed. The grin evaporated his face, draining of color like his body finally understood what his ego had done. I kept my voice flat, almost bored, because the biggest power move in a room like that is refusing to match their emotion. I am the lead agent on an active trafficking task force. I was at Harborline Terminal waiting on a contact when Officer Crowley approached, harassed me, and after I rejected him, assaulted me and arrested me on a fabricated charge. Every second is recorded. My team witnessed it, and the terminal has cameras everywhere. Halvers left the room without a word. Moving fast now, and then it was just me and Crowley sitting in that stale little room with fluorescent lights buzzing, and the silence did the work, because when you take away the audience, a bully's confidence starts collapsing. He finally whispered, "I didn't know," and I looked at him and said, "Quiet. You didn't care. That's the whole problem." My supervisor, Director Mason Price, arrived with agents within minutes, and the entire precinct energy shifted the way it does when people realize the power dynamic just flipped. The captain tried to call it a misunderstanding. Price didn't even blink. "Your officer assaulted a federal agent and obstructed an active investigation. Preserve all evidence now." They photographed my bruised wrists, documented the shoulder-pulled surveillance, secured Crowley's report and memo book, and the more we looked, the clearer it became that his report was fiction, full of clean little lies that were meant to sound official. Price asked me the question that mattered. "Do you want the clean arrest for today, or do you want to know how often he's done this?" And I said without hesitation, "I want the pattern, because a man doesn't get that comfortable in his cruelty overnight comfort. Like that comes from repetition, from knowing the system will shrug." We pulled years of Crowley's arrests, and the pattern showed itself like a bruise you can't unsee. Transit areas, women alone, vague charges that are easy to invent, cases dismissed later but not before damage is done, complaints marked unsubstantiated because it's always easier to doubt the civilian, and then we found a name that matched the shape of his behavior. Lena Ortiz, arrested 2 years earlier at the bus depot on almost the same kind of charge, later dismissed. No big headline, just a quiet scar. We tracked Lena down at a janitorial job, and when we approached, she flinched like she expected to be grabbed. She didn't want to talk. She said nobody believes women against cops. She said that arrest cost her work, sleep, and her ability to stand in public without scanning for uniforms, and I wanted to tell her I understood more than she thought, because I'd spent 1 hour in that powerless space, and it had already left a mark on me. I told her, "He picked you because he thought you were powerless. If you speak now, you stop him from doing it again." And she stared at the floor for a long time like she was weighing fear against hope, and then she nodded and whispered, "Okay, I'll testify." Once Lena agreed, everything moved fast. A grand jury saw the terminal footage, heard the audio from my recorder read, Crowley's report full of lies, and listened to Lena describe the same pattern in a different place, that fake helpful opener, that entitlement, that flip when she said no, and the indictment came down hard: civil rights violation under color of law, falsifying official documents, and perjury, because once you start lying under oath, the law gets less patient. Now here's the part people argue about, because usually cops get to surrender quietly, no cameras, no neighbors, no public shame. And Director Price looked at me and said, "He made his abuse public. The consequence should be public too," and I understood the logic, but I also understood the discomfort, because public spectacle can feel like revenge even when it's accountability. At 6 in the morning, agents went to Crowley's house in Bay Ridge. His wife opened the door half asleep, then froze when she saw the vests. Crowley appeared behind her, hollow-eyed, no swagger left, and an agent said, calm as a grocery list, "Officer Evan Crowley, you are under arrest pursuant to a federal indictment," and the cuffs went on in his doorway, and a local news camera caught it from the curb, because yes, someone tipped them off, and he deserved to feel for once what it's like when your life becomes a public scene you didn't consent to. At trial, his defense tried the oldest trick in the book: put the woman on trial, imply my undercover look invited it, suggest I provoked him, suggest I entrapped him, and the judge shut it down, sharp. A woman's clothing is not consent and rejection is not probable cause, and I almost laughed because it's wild that we still have to say that out loud in a courtroom like it's a new concept. On the stand, I kept it plain, what he said, what he did, the shove, the cuffs, the witnesses, the recording, and then Lena testified, steady but shaking, and the room listened in a way it hadn't listened to her 2 years ago. And that's what justice can feel like. Sometimes, not fireworks, not triumph, just finally being heard without someone rolling their eyes. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours guilty on every count, and at sentencing the judge looked straight at Crowley and said, "You used the law to punish a woman for telling you no. You betrayed your oath." Then he sentenced him to federal time and ordered restitution for victims, because the harm wasn't theoretical, it was real. It was bruises and lost jobs and fear that follows you home. When the marshals guided Crowley out, I heard that same click again, metal closing consequences locking into place. And I didn't feel celebratory. I felt tired, like my body had been braced for impact for days, because winning doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like your nervous system finally unclenches. And now I want to ask you something that's going to split opinions, because it split people in my own orbit too. Was the public arrest justice, or was it revenge? Was the sentence fair, or should it have been harsher? And what do we do with the uncomfortable truth that Crowley wasn't a cartoon villain? He was a type A system-supported type. A man who got away with small abuses until he ran into someone who could hit back with evidence. And what about Briggs, the partner who watched it happen and stayed quiet? Do you think silence should carry consequences too, or is it enough that he eventually cooperated when the federal case started closing in? Because I'm telling you, that's where the real arguments start. So drop your thoughts below, tell me where you land on it, right or wrong, fair or excessive. And if you've ever witnessed someone with authority bullying someone who couldn't fight back, tell me what you did. Did you step in? Did you film it? Did you report it? Or did you look away and regret it later? And if you want more true-to-life stories about power bias and justice, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's ever been told to stay quiet just to keep the peace.